Assalamu alaikum friends. In this video I will be explaining the concept which I previously recorded in audio about destiny and how we can give a best explanation for destiny using some of the defined method of physics. In the field of science and in any subject, if we recall to understand a complex topic, we start with some simple illustrations, with some simple constructs. Like if we want to understand how a rocket will fly out of our gravitational space, then we cannot jump to that topic straight away. First, we have to understand how a simple object moves, and when an object moves, how gravity works, and what all constant and variables are there in order to make an object fly. So to understand a complex thing, first we have to understand a simple construct of the same phenomena in simple terms. Like when we start studying physics, first we study how a simple object moves, then we advance that study, and then we go deep that how a set of objects move. So specifically, if you recall in your school days, in school physics, the the subject starts with a particle, then a system of particle, then an object. And when we study a particle, we assume that it's a point object, and it has got only mass, no length, no no breadth. And when we study the motion of a particle, then it becomes easy to study the motion of a set of particles. And when we study a motion of the set of particles, then we assume one object. So this way we gradually increase our knowledge, and this will be the paradigm, and this will be the method we will be using here in understanding the subject of destiny. So hope you will find this video useful, and I will be more than happy to entertain all your comments and suggestions to improve this subject. If there are some important points you want me to include, or you think some of the points are not rational, some of the points are too vague, then you can probably comment, and we will improvise on those points. Okay, before we start our journey of this discussion, it is very useful that I explain who are the target audience of this session. So, generally, there are, if I classify the people who are interested in destiny and not interested in destiny, are basic two categories. The first category is the one who believe in there is no God, and everything which we observe in our day-to-day life, the origin of this universe, the all the processes, physical, biological, emotional, psychological, all these processes are an outcome of some random phenomena. This random phenomena has got different nature, and these all things are actually a chaos that's happening around, and there is no set rule or law which governs all this happening. Although this statement is not true, what I believe and what most of the scientists believe around the world, and there is a deep discussion around this topic of whether there is a central force which governs this whole universe, or if this is all by chance random. So that's a very different subject. We are not going to deep dive into that subject. I recently got a very useful book by Hamza Zozis. I will I will recommend to read this book. This book is here with me. It's called The Divine Reality, God, Islam, and the Mirage of Atheism. This book deals extensively and in quite detail with all the references of major atheists around the world, and a lot of intellectuals, and a detailed description of what thought processes are behind different school of thoughts, whether it's atheism, an agnostic approach, or a believer approach, and what all pros and cons, and which method is best rational method to arrive at a truth. So yeah, if you want that subject to be dealt in deeply, you want to understand that subject, I will definitely recommend this book to you have to read this book, and you will definitely enjoy the content, hopefully, inshallah. So this first category is never interested in finding a description of destination, because destination is not a question. If everything is random, then things are random. There is no planning, and if there is no planning, there is no creator, there is no central force, then there is no question of destiny. Everything is random. If there is an injustice, then there is an injustice to that poor guy. There is nothing we can do we can do about it. If there is there are some people on this planet who are very rich, and they control everything, and they have got all the resources, very affluent, then it's their it's a random chance. And if there are people dying out of hunger, then that's a random chance. So there is no question of morality and ethics here. And yeah, this is basically a random phenomena. So for in this random phenomena, we cannot say that this is there is a discussion of the destiny, right? So these audience are excluded in this discussion. So when we explain destiny, we assume that the audience who are interested in knowing the concept of destiny, those audiences believe that there is one God. So that's an assumption. If they don't believe there is one God, then there is no question of destiny. This question do not matter at all. So we will exclude that category, and when we advance our discussion, it's assumed that we actually believe in one God. Why we believe in one God, and is it a logical argument, or is there a proof of having one God? Is not a part of this discussion, as I already explained. And the book which I referred, that deals very extensively in detail about those questions. So let's start the journey. Let's assume that we all believe in one God, and when we believe in one God, how can we explain the concept of this? Okay, when we explain any concept, any topic, then there are methods to explain the topic. And one of the method is to bring an example which can illustrate the concept behind. So in this discussion, I will be using the topic of gravity, gravitational force, to explain how destiny works. uh, a few points, the first point is that the information which I am sharing is is something which I think personally. This do not mean that this is an absolute information from an Islamic scholarship. I'm not a scholar, and this concept which I think is totally which I constructed myself based on the information and knowledge I have. And this is the way I think the destiny works. So it's not something absolute knowledge. There is always a room for improvement. And if something contradicts with the authentic teachings, the sacred texts, then it should not be taken in consideration. And if it happens so, then you can just inform me. You can comment on the video, and I will take that section out, because I haven't studied in too much detail everything. And there are very renowned scholars like Imam Ghazali, and um, you know different scholars who have dealt these subjects. and I haven't got an opportunity to go through the entire text and literature of those scholars. One of the reason is that I'm not an Arabic, speaking person, and it's very hard to find a translation of all those works. So maybe when in future, if I get a chance, I will improvise, and yeah, get these knowledge improved. But as of now, let's start what I think, and let's begin the journey. One more point is, for a quick reference, I find one site very useful. That's called Quran.com. So it's Quran.com, and if you open this website, you will find all the chapters, and you can refer it for quick reference if there is some reference which I talk about. One of the reference which I will be using here is, if you go to chapter 55, Surah Rahman, a very popular surah, and so there are two verses which are very thought-provoking for me when I first read this surah, and I came across these ayats. So I was really, surprised, and thought like how profound these verses are. So first, in chapter 55 verse 7 says, وَالسَّمَاءَ رَفَعَهَا وَوَضَعَ الْمِيزَانَ أَلَّا تَطْغَوْا فِي الْمِيزَانِ. Next verse 8, أَلَّا تَطْغَوْا فِي الْمِيزَانِ. So verse 7 says, and the heaven he raised and imposed the balance, that you not transgress within the balance. Just think about it. As this is related with gravity, so I will spend some time on these verses. So the first verse says, and the heaven he raised and imposed the balance. In Quran and in Islamic literature, uh, people often get confused with heaven and paradise. So the word heaven is used for extraterrestrial space, anything, everything which is out of the surface of earth, and in general outside the perceived gravitational force for humans is considered heaven. Heavenly means in a space, and since paradise and hell, Jannah and Jahannam, is outside, the construct of those things are outside the earthly construct of planet Earth. So they are encompassed in the word heaven. Like the word heaven means anything which is beyond the surface of earth, beyond the gravitational reach which we humans perceive. Actually, gravitational force is there, like any planet at any distance experience a gravitational force. So the gravitational force is there, but when I say the perceived gravitational force which we human perceive when we are on the surface of earth, so outside this scope everything is termed as heaven. So this verse says, and the heaven he raised and imposed the balance. So in chapter in Surah Anbiya, Allah Ta'ala says that don't the disbelievers see that the heavens and earth were joined together and we split them apart. So before the discovery of the Big Bang, somewhere in a mid, in 1950, 60 or 70, I don't remember the date, but before the discovery of Big Bang, this verse was not making any sense. So because everyone assumed that this universe is a static continuum, it has got no beginning, no end, everything is in a static state. Some people say this as an ether. So when Quran says that the heavens and earth were joined and we split them apart, it means that there was an event which marked the beginning of this universe. So no one, like no philosopher, no scientist, was buying this argument till the time scientists discovered the cosmic origin of this universe, and they established this theory. Again, the theory, not an established fact to the scientific community, that this universe has a beginning, and that's called Big Bang, right? But Muslims, since they believe in Quran, so they were having this idea of the beginning of universe before the discovery of this Big Bang, because there are many things in Quran which is proved as an established scientific fact, like the aquatic origin of life. It's proved. Okay, sorry, my friend just bring a cup of tea for me. Okay, so I was explaining that uh, you know, so before the discovery of Big Bang, this verse was not making any sense. But when scientific community discovered the theory of Big Bang, then this verse was very coherent and in line with the discovery. So I was explaining that there are certain established fact, like the aquatic origin of life, that everything originated from water. So water is the mother of all origin. This was there in the Quran, and we came to know as a theory, and then we came to know as a scientific established fact. However, the theory of Big Bang is not an established fact. In a sense, you cannot simulate those things in a lab, and you can't do a repeated experimentation. But this is the most likely conclusion, as a most likely theory. And when we study cosmology, cosmic radiations, and a lot of things which is beyond my knowledge, what I get an information from different websites, from NASA, and when I study all those things, then they have a very high chance of occurrence. Like, they believe in that this is the most predictable, most likely theory, the Big Bang. So when you see this verse, was sama rafa wa adal mizan, like, and the heaven he raised and imposed the balance, what does it mean? There are many ways of saying the same thing. Like, if I say every force in this universe exists in pairs, so this is one way of explaining the Newton's third law. So Newton's third law in school textbook, it is explained like this, that every force has got a reaction. A force is called action, and there is an equal and opposite reaction. This is one way of saying thing, and it's a very simple way of saying thing. And the second way is that every force exists in pair, and the first one is opposite to another. That's more of poetic way of saying saying the same thing. So here in this verse, essentially Allah Ta'ala is saying the same thing of how we can define a force of gravity. So if we recall, like, from our school days, that how we define gravity is two mass. Mass is a property of matter. As we know that in universe there are different type of things which exist, and broadly people consider that this universe is made up of two things. One is matter, one is energy. Energy has got different forms, and mass has got different properties, right? So matter has got different properties. Sorry if I said mass, then it's wrong. So one of the property of matter is mass. One of the property is it carries electric charge, right? So when we consider this first property, mass, and this is the reason of its weight, because weight is actually a force of gravity which acts on this property, mass. So we define gravitational force as an attraction between two mass when they are separated on a distance, right? Just keep this definition in mind and then reflect on this ayah. And the heaven he raised and imposed the balance. So first Allah Ta'ala says that this universe was one piece. We split the universe, and with this split, earth and rest of the universe was separated, right? And in this ayah, which is in a different chapter, Allah Ta'ala says the same thing in a different way, and the heaven he raised in the sense when we are observing this phenomena from the surface of earth, then heaven, like if this is earth, heaven he raised and imposed the balance. And what is the balance? It's a force between these two. So in heaven you have got different planets, comets, stars, and different satellites and everything. All those thing and earth, there is a balance which was imposed. Balance, what is balance? Is a force. So with the splitting there was a balance imposed. So this balance in physics we say it's a gravitational force. Here in Quran it is termed as the balance. We'll just go to the next ayah. Okay, that transgress within the balance. It means that the whole purpose of this gravitational force on the surface of earth was that we do not escape its field, right? That transgress within the balance, its field. One of the classical meaning which was taken out of these ayahs is that there was a balance imposed on the surface of earth, so you can do the weighing of objects for trade in a justified way. So if Allah Ta'ala has made the gravitational force uniform across the surface of earth, although it changes with altitude, but on the surface of earth where we all exist at this layer, Allah Ta'ala has not done any injustice from region to region. There could be a minute variation if we do a calculation based on the sea level altitude, but in a community when people are living around in some span of geography, it's all constant, like the gravitational force. So Allah says that when the creator of this universe has made this thing balanced, then you should not make injustice with this balance in doing all your trade and finance, in doing the weights and everything. So this is one of the meaning. And second meaning which I derive from it is that this balance is of gravitational force, and both are one of the same thing. If you just think it deeply, that you will understand that what I'm trying to say. Okay, so let's move on to the next topic. Now, once we understand this force, the force of gravity, I think it's pretty clear, and I have given one reference from the Quran as well to think about it, that there is a force which attracts to material object by virtue of its mass. If there is no mass, there is no such gravitational force. If there is a gravitational force, means there is a mass, and mass is a property of an object, of a material object. For a non-material object like a spirit, we don't know that a spirit scientifically exists or not, but for the sake of argument, for non-material objects, this property do not exist. So in scientific term, we can say that a spirit have got no mass. That's what Jesus said, when he came out of the alleged crucifixion, and then he met his disciples. Then the disciples were terrified, and then he said, touch me and feel me. I'm not a spirit, because a spirit has got no flesh and bones. And what is flesh and bone? Flesh and bone is the material object, right? It has got mass. So essentially what Jesus Christ, peace be upon him, what he is saying, that since I have got this property of mass attached with me, it means I am not a spirit. So if we take that account of Jesus Christ to be true, and we believe in those ayah, then then it's a truth from an Islamic point of view that a spirit do not have mass. It's a massless entity, and we will experience it in the hereafter. So that's pretty clear. Now let's deep dive into it. I will give you one example. Like if I ask you to imagine you have got an elephant and you have got an ant. elephant is very heavy. It's it's massive on the terrestrial surface. If we take the sea out, and it's one of the massive creature. And ant is very small, like its mass is nothing as compared to elephant. And if both of them drop from a certain height, mass, the elephant and ant. So if I ask you the question, which one will hit the ground first, then the obvious answer, you need not to think, but with the practical experience, you will say that the heavier object hits first, and the lighter object hits. Uh, it will hit after some time, because it will float in the in the air. Like air will provide some floating force. However, from a point of view of classical physics, if we take in account only the gravitational force, not air buoyancy. Air buoyancy is a force which is exerted by air to any object. When it falls, gravitational force pull it downwards, and the air and the environment actually exerts a thrust, because it's going down. Then air is applying a force upwards, right? So the net force is actually the difference between the gravitational force and the air drag, right? And with that force, you hit the ground. So in case of elephant, this air drag is very less, because gravitational force is very high by virtue of its mass. And we know the formula, like the force which earth apply is the mass multiplied by the acceleration, which is generated by earth's gravitational force. And for ant, that force is less, but the buoyancy force is comparable with this gravitational force, because the mass of ant is very less. So so it will experience air drag, and it will float, and it will take some time. But if we take air out, and we imagine a condition of vacuum, so in the condition of vacuum, the acceleration which will be provided by this gravitational force is uniform irrespective of the mass. So heavier object, very heavy object, experience an acceleration by Earth's gravitational force, and a smaller object also experience the same acceleration. And this acceleration is calculated with all these scientific calculations. This acceleration is 9.8 meter per second square, and in rough figure we can say 10 meter per second square. So every object, no matter how heavy it is and how light it is, the same acceleration, they will experience the same acceleration. And if there is a vacuum, you will see an elephant and ant exactly hitting the same time to the surface of Earth. Very hard to imagine, but if you know the laws behind it, and you know the calculation, then you will appreciate that both the things hit the ground at the same time. And this follows a set rule, and the rule says it's the final speed is equals to the initial speed plus acceleration due to gravity multiplied by time. So this is the equation. Generally, general people who experience these phenomena, they are not interested in these equations. They just see it. Like if you go around, if you are traveling in a car and you turn at some turning, then there is a force which acts on your car, that's called centripetal force, and that's responsible for the turn. And this force has got certain limits. If this limit is not reached, your car will topple. But you don't do the calculation while you drive the car, you just experience it. And with this experience, you know how much speed you should have. If that speed exceeds, like without doing a calculation, that you are going to topple, your car will not withstand this speed at this turning angle, and you will lose the control, right? So the same way, when you calculate the time it takes for an elephant to hit the ground and time it takes for an ant to hit the ground, both the time in calculation will give you the same time. However, in daily experience, since we don't have a vacuum situation, we have air around us, then we do not experience these type of things. So what I'm trying to say is that just if we go beyond a step beyond the calculation, uh, the physics, and the mathematics which is behind it, then we know that if an object is dropped, so every 1 second, the speed of that object adds by 10 meter per second, or precisely 9.8 meter per second. So if I drop an object, if I ask you what is the speed after 1 second, so precisely it's 9.8 meter per second. Whether it is elephant, whether it's an ant, or a big motorbike, anything, or you are there, after 1 second, the speed will be 9.8 meter per second. Or roughly, for the sake of argument, say 10 meter per second. 9.8 and 10 are approximately close. If I ask you what will be the speed after 2 seconds, so multiply by 2, so 20 meter per second will be the speed. After 3 seconds, 30 meter per second will be the speed. Now just think again. There is a law of gravity. It has got a reference in Quran. Just take the reference out. Just think from an atheist point of view. There is a law, and this law has got some constant and variables. In the sense, the constant which is there in this law is the gravitational constant and acceleration due to gravity. These are the constants. And these constants are constants in the sense, it's not random, like it's not changing here and there. It's changing with altitude. The acceleration due to gravity, if you calculate, it will change with the altitude, and then with this we can calculate the escape velocity of a rocket as well. But on the surface of Earth is constant, and there are certain variables with which speed you can throw an object, and if you can hit an object to the ground. These are the variables, and these are your willpower. We say in the theology, the free will. Free will is a variable. God has given to all of us. This is called free will. And there are certain things constant, where we don't have a free will. Like acceleration due to gravity is constant. We don't have a free will here. It's not like I decide, no, at this point, at this place, acceleration due to gravity has to be 20 meter per second square. Because I am weighing some object, I want some profit. That's going against the ayah of Quran when it says, so that you don't transgress the limits, right? So it's constant. It's not your free will. It's the will of, if I don't say the word God, say the word nature, I will say that it's a will of nature. You don't have a control on this will, on the acceleration due to gravity. You're getting my point, right? So there are certain things constant, there are certain things variables, and if you know the relationship between them, that's magic. That's knowledge. So you know the relationship between these variables and constants, and with this relationship of constant and variables, if you explore this law, then you have a power with you that you can predict that what will be the speed of this object after 1 second, 2 second, 3 second, 10 second. You're getting what I'm trying to say, that this law, constant and variables, equation, and then you can predict what is going to happen. And in a plain and simple term, this constant is we call it the qadr of Allah. It's the predefined destiny. You know, in Surah Yasin, when it says that, you know, everything is this universe is moving around an orbit. You know, we came to know recently with all this exploration, space exploration, but it says in Quran that everything is moving in its orbit in a continuous motion. Everything is in continuous motion. That's the nature of this universe. And when it says that the moon traverses the different phases which when we observe it from Earth, and that's the qadr of the qadr of moon. So the word qadr is used there. So what I understand, that the word qadr is the law, is either one law or a set of laws, or the cumulative law which govern this universe. We don't know the cumulative equations. We know certain things, like we know the Schrodinger equation, which explains the motion of an electron. Previously, we were having this different conception, the Bohr's theory, the quantization of the electron path, and before that we have got Rutherford model. So these constants, like the constant of electrostatic force and the constant of gravity, these constants are the qadr of Allah, are the destiny of Allah. And the free will are the variables which we human beings have got in our hand. So this free will, when we use along with the constant which Allah has given to us, that's qadr, that actually determines our action, right? So you have got constants like constant of gravity and acceleration due to gravity. You can't mess with these constants. You don't have the power to mess with these constants. These constants are there. They are the qadr of Allah. They are the destiny, predefined destiny. What I mean by predefined destiny, like if you throw a ball, it's destined to hit the ground. It's destined. You can't make that destiny escape, right? Unless you mess around with this constant and variables and you change the equation. If you throw a ball straight up, it will come straight down. That's the destiny. Like, because the variable you used is throwing the ball straight up. But like in a cricket playground, when someone hits the boundary, it's 4, and the person on the boundary throws the ball. It do not throw the ball straight up. It throws the ball towards the wicket keeper, and it follows a trajectory, right? So this trajectory is again a different path, but it depends on the person who is throwing the ball. He is using the variable, that's the free will, and this variable is the speed and angle with which it throws the ball. That's the variable. But the force that works, the gravitational force, is still constant, is still the same. That's the qadr of Allah, right? That's the designed framework of destiny which the ball is subjected to. Now think again, why this fielder is throwing the ball to the wicket keeper? Because there's a game going on, and this game has got a rule, and this rule is destined to win the people are using this rule to win the game. And this psychology is forcing that fielder to throw this ball to the wicket keeper, right? So again, there is a psychological law. There is a law of psychology. There is a law of emotion. There is a law beyond this physical entity which we experience, right? So all this law cumulatively define a set of actions, right? When I am in a stadium and watching a cricket match and then say, okay, I know the destiny. If ball will go to the fielder will throw it to the wicket keeper. So that's the destiny of ball. I know it, and he will exactly do the same thing because this is the law of the game, right? This do not mean that this wicket keeper is not having the free will of throwing the ball anywhere. He has got the free will, but the law but the set of laws, actually not a single law, which he is subjected to, that set of law will definitely govern that wicket keeper or that fielder to throw the ball in certain direction, and you are having pretty good chance to predict that and to be accurate, right? So this is, in summary, the whole dilemma of destiny. And if you see the rules, then you can tell that how it is predetermined. Like the rule of the law of gravity is setting a destination for everything, anything, everything which moves around the earth. That sets its destiny, right? And the law of a game sets the destiny of an action which a player will take in the field of cricket, in the field of football, and anything, right? So these are the simple laws, right? I explained these things in simple, plain English term, using the law of gravity, and there's one game, right? So when we believe in one creator who created this universe, the whole thing, I explained only one thing, the law of gravity, right? There is a law of electrostatic force, there is a law of magnetic force, there is a law of weak force that we call van der Waals forces, the forces which we do not see, like it acts between the different layers of the molecules. And there is a nuclear force which laws between the subatomic particles inside an atom, and they are so tightly packed, if one atom explodes, you know what's going to happen. So these are the laws. We have got knowledge of certain laws, and if we know the knowledge of certain laws, we can predict the state of the particular object who is subjected to that law. And we don't feel any, say like any problem, we don't see a problem in predicting it. But um, when these things are so combined and mixed with our human psyche, emotion, and intelligence and everything, then for a general person who is not coming from a background of science and technology, they have got a choice of either believing it or not believing it. That makes them either atheist or a believer. So I'm not saying that to attain a level of iman, this knowledge is actually necessary. So our iman is, we believe Muslims is something which is a gift from Allah, and it comes to us based on our action and sincerity. If we are sincere in our what we speak, what we think, and what we do, these three things are synchronized, and we are sincere, and we address this sincerity with our action, with our all interaction, then the gift of iman is bound to come. We'll receive that iman. But there are people around who use science as a tool to negate the divine laws. So that's where this video is the explanation of that basic notion. Like this is how these laws are. If you understand one law of gravity, you can predict the motion of a particle, motion of a cricket ball. You can predict how it's going to move, what will be its trajectory and everything. So all these laws are created by God Almighty. It's not only one of the many laws, and Allah Ta'ala is having information of all the laws because He is the creator of law. So once He created this law, He knows the course of action, the course of path, and the course of anything which someone is going to take subjected to that law. He knows everything. That's destiny. That's the predefined knowledge. That's something which I assume, I may or may not be correct. If I'm wrong, I ask Allah for forgiveness. That's there in the Lawh Mahfuz. The environment you are born, the education which you get, the conditions you live in, all those things are non-physical. intangible things, and these are also subjected to certain laws. So as you can predict the motion of an object using the law of gravity, if you understand every law, any law, every law, if you understand everything, then you can say that what this person is going to do in the next 2 hours. But what I believe that, and what Allah says in the Quran, in Surah Jinn, I think I'm just not recalling the ayah, that no matter how hard we try, we can't escape the boundaries set by Allah Ta'ala. We can play around in certain area, and this do not mean that we shouldn't try exploring the universe and the surroundings. But this is how Allah's plan is, that He's holistic. He has defined laws, constants around it. That's the qadr of Allah. We can't mess around with it. We can play around using those laws, and that degree of freedom which we have is the free will, and that's how the destiny is. I think if someone asks you how Allah knows everything, then what is the free will? I think I have explained it very clearly, that free will is the variables you have in your hand, and these variables, Allah has given you these variables, and we perceive them as a variable because we haven't gone too far in understanding those variables. Maybe those are variables from our point of view, but from a higher intelligence, if we see those variables, they are constants. So think deeply on it. But we can't be sure and certain of every knowledge, but we can assess the knowledge and define what is constant and variable from the frame of reference from where we are observing the phenomena, right? So this is how it works, right? And your free will is not taken out of this whole cosmology of destiny. It's not like Allah Ta'ala has made your thought as a constant. If our thoughts are constant and we do not have a choice of thinking something else, right, then it becomes a constant, and then there's no free will. But whatever I'm doing, whatever I'm experiencing, whatever I'm going to do is something which is variable, and that's a free will, and that is subjected to certain constants which are set up by Almighty in this world. And these constant and variable, the interaction between them gives us a choice of doing good and bad. And what is good and bad is explained in the last and final revelation, Quran. If we read it, we will come to know every aspect, every facet of life, that what should be done, what we should do as to be in line with the divine laws, and what we do with which makes us not in line, not to the Sirat al-Mustaqim. And that's the way we explain these things in detail, in perspective, right? So thanks for watching the video. I will be more than happy to get some feedback and comments. And if you find this video useful, share it with other friends. And if you think certain things are not right, there are things which are scientifically, conceptually, logically wrong, just educate me, and I will try to improvise on those topics. Thank you. Thanks for watching the video. Peace. May Allah's blessing and His mercy be on all of you. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.